early stages. So there's a thing called life.
Yeah,
So what we have is life is basically the C, so the letter C between the B and the D. So you
right,
have B being birth, D being death, and C is the choices that you make in between.
right,
So what we do is we treat that as the core concept
right.
because that gives us our existence on obviously this planet and how we kind of construct our own experiences within that kind of very narrow but rather large experience. Then when we have that, the choices then get expanded on in terms of, well, have you got any pre-contractual agreements before you come into this experience?
Mhm.
Then, because we have those pre-contract agreements, it might be something like karma, so cause and effect. So you did something to somebody or they did something to you in a past life, and it gets carried forward to be balanced in this lifetime. That
Right.
becomes a choice, but
That's it.
technically it's predestined.
Because I mean, I do believe in karma, but I was kind of thinking this lifetime.
Yeah. So karma is literally just cause and effect. It's an
Yeah.
action. And
Okay.
because it's an action, you can't have an effect without a cause, and therefore you can't have a cause that doesn't create an effect.
Mhm.
So that's why we live in obviously the polarity and then the 3D. And then we can start building concepts around all of these mini concepts to work out how life actually operates so that you can get ahead of the game rather than being just part of the game as such.
So it's like atoms and their relativity to each other,
Yep.
that you're connected. So you're
Yep.
connected
So
throughout
if you
lives.
Yeah, so if you go back even as far as like one consciousness, or you go back as far as Adam and Eve, like it started at an origin. Like you could go to the Big Bang Theory, which is the scientific side. Well, what's to say that's not just somebody pressing the power button on a computer? And therefore everything sparks up, and it's the first time you turn your laptop on, and then it creates all the operating systems, and then it creates all the apps, and then it creates everything else.
You
And
believe
then you
in.
get into the realms of like The Sims. Now I can control on a screen a little person and I can get them to build a house or go and earn some money, and then you can create simulation theory from that. But there's loads of different ways of isolating them, which is why everybody's view will sit in a certain bucket. However, all of these things fold back in on themselves and you can connect them quite easily. And then they create the bigger picture, but it's like coming up with a jigsaw. You
Mhm.
don't pay for a finished jigsaw. You pay for the pieces that
Mhm.
then get put together to create the jigsaw.
Mhm.
But at every step of the way, you only have part of the puzzle.
Mhm.
Even though the full puzzle is already there, you just haven't yet constructed it all. That's quite interesting how you can fold simulation theory into jigsaws and puzzles and how life creates and operates. And then you've got all of the layering that then folds off of that. However, it all folds back into itself.
Mhm.
And then we basically have what is the universe, or the U as in YOU, universe as in self, and everything else comes off of that. So
So
fun and games.
you discover these past lives
Mhm.
through hypnotherapy, through actually going into the subconscious.
You can access the subconscious just by changing the brainwave states.
Right.
So if you want to self-hypnotize, it's as simple as if you look up into obviously where your eyebrows are and just look directly up.
Mhm.
Then if you start literally keeping it there, what you'll find is that you'll start blinking. So the idea is to continually look up until the point of your eyes feel heavy.
Mhm.
And then when your eyes feel heavy, you still continue to look up, but you shut your eyelids down. And then when you shut your eyelids down, they flutter, and that fluttering is the change of the brainwave state. Then
Wow.
what that should do is it should close off the prefrontal neocortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, which is the conscious part of the brain.
Yeah.
And then it relaxes the nervous system to then allow you access to any cellular memory that you've carried across lifetimes. So then what you're doing is you're not reliving, you're reviewing these experiences, but from a place of it's no longer me living it, but I can now make sure that everything I knew about it was correct and accurate. So it's
If
like
you're doing it to
accessing a file on a
yourself,
computer.
if you're doing it
Yep.
to yourself and you're accessing that,
Hmm.
when you kind of come through, what would you do? Just fall asleep and then wake up and then you'd remember that.
So a
Or
lot of
you'd be in a
people,
hazy kind of
yeah,
sleep.
a lot of people think that like the hypnotherapy side is some like entertainment thing. So you've seen where they click their fingers and say you're a dog and you end up peeing on a hydrant or like some little pot or something like that and it's on stage. That's not what we're doing with hypnotherapy. You're in control at all times. And
Mhm.
what you're just doing is you're just changing the brainwave state to access files that are kind of hidden. So
And
if
then you'd
you look at the
remember those,
brain,
bring them back
yeah,
with you to your current state. So you don't
yeah,
need
and
somebody there for your subconscious to kind of speak to for them to then relay it back to you when you
no,
step out of it.
no. So you can do the self hypnosis, as in you can access things, and it's basically like a type of meditation at that point. But
Mhm.
if you want to do the real deeper work, you kind of have to have somebody to hold the space and guide you,
Mhm.
because you've got to think at any one of these given moments, if you come across a scenario or an event, what you're going to do is you're going to initially go back to that event, and everything that's in that folder that was stored is then going to come to the surface. And you've got to then remember that at the point of you doing this now, your brain development would have stopped at the point of that trauma. So what then happens is if it's, say, happened at the age of 4 or 5, you might now be in a body that's aged 30, 35. However, the mental state has never developed above the coping mechanism that wasn't able to deal with that original trauma event. So this is why we then look at holding the space and having somebody to guide, because
Mhm.
it's then about educating and looking and holding the space so that we can go back and actually go, well, hold on, we now need to develop these coping skills in order to move them forward. And then in moving them forward, we can then stop that lack of brain development because ultimately your body got stuck at that point in time. And every instance and every scenario after that, you act from that place of, I'm stuck here,
Let's
but you've
just
never
vary
gone back and reviewed it. Yep.
one single variable, like one minute
Yep.
kind of capability that
Hmm.
has stopped in its tracks. So if you went
Yep.
back to age two or something that you can't consciously remember,
Yep.
and then
Then you've
you
got
access that
to,
memory that you wouldn't
yeah.
otherwise have accessed in your conscious memory, but you go into your subconscious and then you bring it back. And then how quickly can you train your brain to kind of catch up?
So yeah, but it's not that simple. And the reason it's not that simple is because everything in the mainstream is not designed for you to ever get out of it because there's no money in it, right? You got to think if you cure everything on the planet from the limited thinking perspective, you're not going to be able to monetize it. So you're
Yes, so
not going
it's
to
not
be
just
able,
pharmaceuticals, it's
yeah,
psychology as well.
yeah. And it's the holistic side that we're looking at. But
Yeah.
what you look at is if you get beyond that stage, you realize that there will always be problems that you can monetize,
Mhm.
right? So it doesn't matter if you fix something, something else will subsequently be created off the back of you fixing that thing. Because there'll be other problems, there'll be other things that come out. But it's basically a case of if you keep somebody sick, you can monetize it. However, if you keep somebody healthy, you can monetize that, but it's not looked at in that manner. So what
Mhm.
we're looking at here is it's a case of mainstream wants to keep you stuck. So they'll give you just enough to give you that dopamine hit, give you that false hope, give you that sort of into a, oh, well, there could be a solution, but it's never delivered upon because you can't maintain it long
Bit
term.
with psychoanalysis and
Yeah.
psychiatry, you mean, which is, yes,
Hmm.
exactly.
So even if you go to a counselor, even if you go to a
Mhm.
therapist,
Mm.
they're all pushed through the same schooling system, and that schooling system is designed to keep you stuck.
Mhm.
But what you're finding now is there's people that are breaking out of this kind of stuckness and they're going, well, actually, there's different ways of thinking.
Mhm.
Somebody who's dyslexic will have a different way of looking at problems. Somebody who's got autism has a different way of learning and a different way of thinking, but
This is
society has
all
to
metals,
minimize it.
isn't it? This is all
Yeah.
metals through
Hmm.
inoculation
Yeah.
to
So
keep you.
what we're then doing is we're curbing all of these thought leaders and people that look at patterns and think differently, because then what it does is it maintains the narrative. and it blocks the forward progression. But what we're looking at is how can we get somebody, going back to your question, out of where they're stuck? And what we do is we go back to the root cause. Where did it start? And therefore, where was it originally domesticated, i.e., taught or learned? Then, how is it self-domesticated, i.e., you don't need the person that taught you now because it's ingrained in your head. So you yourself can now do it in the absence of any outside stimulus. And then, how do we then get rid of the attachment, which is the feeling that then links the thoughts and the actions and behaviors all in one? And that all now lives inside the individual themselves.
And that
So
is the
what we're then doing,
neurotransmitters, the chemicals, yeah.
yep,
And that's what you try to recreate. So if you have a trauma when you're young, or if you
mhm,
have that kind of relationship with your parents or your
yep.
caregivers, that's what you try to recreate later on in adulthood with your other half.
Yeah.
Or,
So you're not even trying to create it. The subconscious is running at 95%, and all you're doing is you're just showing yourself that this template that I learned or thought I learned doesn't actually work for me. So there's an imbalance. And what you're then doing is discovering more about yourself, finding out more about who you are, so that you can go, well, actually, this doesn't work for me. But it didn't work for the people that taught you it either. They just ignored it or managed or coped with it and couldn't be bothered to deal with it.
Mhm.
Now, you as the cycle breaker, or you as the kind of um, person that's breaking all these curses and whatever sort of
Yes.
avenue you want to go down, it's like
Yeah.
you can now see it and you can see the dysfunction and you're not playing to that dysfunction and you want to break out of the dysfunction. But then you've obviously got the loyalties or the negative loyalties that take you back to the people you care about. And then that's why it's hard to break out of it and break free from it because you've got beliefs that are maintaining it, but you haven't got beliefs that can break it. But then you've also got negative loyalties that keep you stuck.
Mhm.
And you have to break down all of these components to get to the point where it's like, well, hold on, I've got this belief, but what am I maintaining? And then why doesn't it allow me to move forward? And then we're just breaking all of these subsections to then go, well, hold on, who am I here to be? Because that's your own kind of, if you're going to sum it up, that's your only purpose in life. Who are you and who are you meant to be? As long as you can find that out, then everything is on purpose, as in it's a deliberate action made through free will and choice, not programming, conditioning, patterns, habits, behaviors, societal sort of conditions, and all of this other stuff that you can kind of throw into the mix.
Mhm.
And then that's basically all you have to do. Work out who you are and then bring that to kind of the world or the new earth or whatever the concept is that you're sort of operating with.
Mhm. And the power of the mind is just
Hmm.
like phenomenal. You can do this, but it's the belief that you can do it, or the knowledge that
Yep.
you, how powerful it is, or just to know the intelligence to know that you can do whatever you want to do, and all you
Hmm.
have to do is think what you want, imagine what you want,
Yep.
and then make it happen with no
It's
limitations.
yeah, it's why I work with the mind because ultimately the structure is spiritual, mental, emotional, physical. So you can go through and clear the physical, clear the emotional, clear the mental, but if you break the mental,
Mhm.
then the emotional and the physical can clear when you can put your body in a safe space. The hardest part is the mental construct, because if we then take it back a step, it's like the central processing unit. So if you ever look at I don't know if you've ever seen like the old film projectors in cinemas, where you load the tape in the back onto the projector and it projects it obviously out onto the screen. What we're doing is we're doing the same thing with the human body. So your eyes are black holes. They don't look outwardly, they look inwardly. So you're taking in light from the external, then
Go
it
back to the
mirrors,
occipital lobe, and then
yep, and then you're inverting the image, and then you're putting your mental constructs on the image, and then you're projecting it back out again. So what you're
yes,
then
so you're
doing is
filling
you're
in the gaps.
creating it based on here's gaps, this is what I know, therefore this can go into that gap, and you make a story that makes you
Stored to
appear
delusion.
right so that you can exist and therefore you're safe. However, some bits don't go with other bits. And this is why I use like my method, which is the disjointed learning theory method.
Right.
And the reason being is you learn things over a period of time, then you create gaps, but then you use things that you know to fill gaps in. But on a larger scale, you have the whole, well, hold on, we can only take in a certain amount of information. So a lot of the stuff that we know doesn't even exist.
Mhm.
We just fill it in so that we've got consistency around us. But then once you work with the mind, you can then start going, well, hold on, this person said this to me, but I made it that, but they didn't mean it that way.
Mhm.
Whereas you have to fill the gap. So all I know is what I know based on what I was once told, and that can go in the gap, even if it's not in the present moment, the same way it was taught to me in the past. And then we go into a whole another concept of how does the past affect the current and the current affect your future? And then you can go down that avenue as to, well, the present moment is where the power is because it's going to influence the future, but it can also transmute the past.
And in quantum physics, the present and the past and the future, there's is all the same thing anyway, on the same
Yeah,
frequency.
yeah. But this is the like once you start digging into it, it's like you can get little aspects or little sneak peeks into things.
Mhm.
But then the more exposed you are to other areas and other modalities, you realize that it all comes from the same core principle. It's just worded differently, or somebody understands it from a different angle or perspective. And all you're doing is just collecting all of these different perspectives just to create your own perception. And therefore, you can then work with that rather than the perspective. But too many times it's like, well, your perspective isn't valid. I'm not accepting that. Only mine's okay. And then you lose the perception because you've neglected all of these other perspectives. That's
Yeah.
quite complicated.
Well, I mean, it's yeah, so everything is subjective basically in its simplest form.
Yeah. Yeah.
Obviously, place where you're coming from.
Hmm.
Gosh. So, the really interesting part for me is like the past lives bit and the fact that your physical life, this on this life,
Yeah.
is definitely, well, it's a new spirit. It might be the first life, might it?
Yep. Hmm.
How can you tell whether somebody's like had lives before or
You would
a fresh
usually
spirit?
look at it from a place of complexity.
Mhm.
So if you're in a human body, you've clearly had multiple lifetimes. So if you look at it from a life cycle perspective, if you have an animal that's locked up in a zoo, for instance, right, they're probably just learning how to use their limbs, how to climb, how to survive, how to feed themselves, right? And they're the early stages of what you classify as existing or life.
Mhm.
So they don't have this autonomy. They can't influence or affect their environment. They are subject to the environment and they have to find a way of coping and managing. So this is why that's kind of early stage because you're then looking at, well, hold on, I need to learn how to function. It's like when I first start a computer game, I need to know how to jump. I need to know how to move left and right. I need to know how to go and pick things up and grab things. Later on in the harder levels and the more complex it gets, you're then developing all of the extra skills to play the game properly. And that's then where the human existence comes in because you're now able to influence and affect your reality in real time. And by real time, we're talking about if somebody comes up to you and goes, oh, do you want to fight? You can go, no, I'm not interested in a fight, or yes, I'm going to fight you. Whereas if you have an animal or you have a baby in the early stages, they're still subject early on to, well, hold on, if something happens to me, I can't do anything about it.
Mhm.
So what we're doing is we're looking at that stage of the cycle. So an early soul will either come in and do some sort of mainstream healing work. So like cats, they're very good at healing or absorbing energies or kind of transmuting. And what their function is just to kind of exist and obviously set the frequency through their purring, and they can heal and they can take things and they can transmute and they're very simple in that structure. but
Mhm.
they're not going to be able to go, oh, by the way, get off the seat. I need to sort of sit down. And they can't influence their reality in that way. So that's one form of them coming in. But another form is you could quite easily just come in to have the human experience. And it could be as simple as part of the birthing process. So this might be relevant to you from obviously our earlier discussion, but you can have somebody come in just to have part of the experience. So if you think once you have the full birthing experience, you're squeezed into the reality in order to pressurize yourself,
Unless there's a C-section, yeah.
right? Unless there's a C-section. But you can choose as a soul whether or not you want that squeezing or you want a life that isn't as squeezed. However, some souls will want to come in just to have 9 months or to have 6 months of the growing process. Then you'll find that
They
that's,
choose. They
yeah,
choose.
yeah. So if you're a new soul and you go, well, hold on, I don't want the full experience yet, I could go, well, I let me try a month, right? Because I might need to get acclimatized to it. So you come in for a month, but on the outside, it's like, well, hold on, we lost the pregnancy.
So everything is meant to happen.
Yeah,
So
right?
if you have terminations and you
Yep,
think that you've terminated and then you
yep.
forever feel terrible that you've
But
done
but
that.
you could quite easily have had
That
that
was
as part of
planned
the
by the
agreement. Yeah, between the two
soul
people.
babe. The soul of the baby chose
Yeah.
that to happen.
That's their part of their experience. So they have to have a way of coming in and have to have a way of coming out. But what usually happens is if you have a termination or if you have an abortion, that's just the ending of like part of the phase so that souls can get used to acclimatizing to what they're coming into. So you might have multiple cases where there's miscarriages, but what that means is the soul isn't quite ready to come in yet.
Is that
Or
the
the
same
parent,
soul? Is it the
yeah,
same soul?
same soul
Each time that would be the same
each
soul.
time, and it will come back
Mm.
regularly. So what then happens is you think you've lost a child. However, if you then have a child, it's the same soul completing that part of the process. Otherwise, you've got an
Different father
imbalance.
that would be, will it?
You can have the soul is different to obviously the cellular makeup.
Right.
So
So
you
my
can have an
actual
ex
children could have
you can
been
have
the same
yeah,
soul as.
yep. So for instance, if you have a miscarriage and it doesn't quite go well, and then you have subsequent miscarriages, either the parent isn't quite ready yet, or the soul that's coming in isn't quite ready yet. And what they do is they agree between them to keep going through that process until both of them are ready.
Right.
So usually you're not going to get a, oh yeah, let me just kind of I'll come in and then somebody's like another soul can take over. You have the same soul coming back in just to do all the kind of stages of that part of that process.
Right.
And then what happens is you complete that process. Otherwise, you get the karmic imbalance because there's a cause and effect. So you've got to think if you don't complete the start of that process, then you and the person, i.e., the mother, haven't completed your contract or agreement between you because the process hasn't been fulfilled.
Right.
So what you do is you keep coming back in until you complete that process. And therefore, what it becomes is it's not a loss, it's just a process to get you to the outcome, but somebody isn't quite ready yet to do the full thing. And that could be for a number of reasons. But
Nice way to think. Gives you a nice
souls will
peace of
usually
mind.
pick, yeah, but they will usually pick their parents based on the experiences they want to have.
So we picked our parents.
But, yep, so whether you like them or not, kind of they will have traits, they'll have their own experiences, they'll have views and opinions and ways of dealing with things. They'll give you the apparent negative, but for you to learn the lack or the loss or the extreme opposite. So therefore you fight against it and therefore you learn the thing that your soul's come in. Or you accept that it is, and then later on in life you have to go and correct it. But there is no right or wrong. There's just a process, which is I want to come in and learn these lessons, and therefore I need to have a vehicle to have experience. Otherwise, if you think of it in spiritual terms, I'm a ghost on a white screen in a white room in a white something else. So how do you distinguish between what's you and what's somebody else? So you can't learn about yourself because everything is just merged into just this oneness. So if you were to go and strip that out and create, how do you learn about yourself? Fragment yourself into multiple different particles and then view it from different experiences and different perceptions. Now you can work out who you are because you can see things from different angles. And then you can work out what's right, what's not right, how you've been covering things up, how there's mirrors, how there's projections, how there's elements and fragments of you that are stuck in other people because of attachments. And then how do you bring all of those pieces? It's like basically a massive Easter egg hunt, but without the Easter egg.
Mhm.
And then you go back claiming all of these fragments from past lives. But going back to your original point about past lives, what's to say that you just haven't got multiple layers that are overlapped? So therefore, the moment in this lifetime that you go, oh my God, I had this dream, or I had this image, or I had this kind of deja vu, wasn't just an overlap of at some point in a past life, you had this experience, and in this lifetime at a different age, you just overlap them. And then these experiences basically play out at the same time. However, you learn the experience in one and you experience the experience in the other. And therefore, you balance both of them because the timeline has overlapped on both lives in terms of existence playing out at the same time. That's quite an interesting way of looking at it. But you could have somebody that has a past life trauma at 23, but then it might show itself in this lifetime at 34. But then they're just stacked on top of each other. So 23 in this lifetime and 34 in this lifetime means they're now parallel. And therefore, you're working on this problem and you can access both elements of that problem to then balance it across lifetime.
How do you know all this?
Well, there's a thing called an infinite pool of wisdom. And once you get beyond the conscious, the subconscious, the superconscious, you realize that you can channel.
So
And then what you do,
the
yeah,
pituitary gland in the middle of your head, that's supposed to
hmm
kind of let all of this wisdom and spiritual
yeah.
in. Is that
But what we have is we have
it?
calcification
Not
of
having
it.
any fluoride or
Yeah. So you could say it's that, but then you have to look at it from the bigger picture. You're going to have a way of stopping it functioning for as long as it takes for you to be able to use it correctly. So you could say it's fluoride, it's in the water, and it's all this other stuff. But the reality is you need whatever that mechanism is. Otherwise, can you imagine coming in as a baby and being like, well, hold on, let me go and wave my magic wand and here's everything I want. It's like it wouldn't be worth playing the game because you've got everything, so there's nothing to learn. So what we do is we come in and we have this restriction, we have this veil, we have this illusion that we then have to learn to break out of and break away from in order to then give the game a bit of complexity. However, rather than enjoying the journey, we just want the destination. And then that takes away from the experience because ultimately the greatest learning is during the experience, not the outcome. And yet we've been ingrained and conditioned to go, well, hold on, I want instant gratification. And if I don't get instant gratification, then what's the point of me doing it? And this is then why it's ingrained in us to go through that process because we have to go, well, hold on, we don't need the material. But it's nice to have the material, but through choice, not obligation. And we're just shifting those dynamics around to then go, well, hold on, I want to create this life. What does it look like for me? But it's not from a place of attachment to it. Like I haven't got this £100,000 car because it makes me look good. I look good even if I don't have the car. Therefore, the car just becomes a choice, not an obligation. And it's just rebalancing all of these elements, but it can play out in health, wealth, relationships, mindset, mental health. You've then got physical conditions and ailments. You've then got phobias, and these are
a lot of
just
it
the
comes from nutrition,
clues.
though, doesn't it? And eating the right
Yeah.
things. Obviously, it's for the gut and the brain connection.
Yeah.
So, where are you on Satanism
Um,
and greed and all of this?
it's polarity.
Right.
So if you have a look, let's just take the Satanism out of it. You've got good and bad,
Mhm.
right? But if you have a look at, let's go to like Marvel superheroes,
Mhm.
what's the difference between the good guy and the bad guy? There isn't, because they both think they're doing the best for what they're looking to achieve.
Mhm.
But the perspective is different. But yet ultimately they're trying to counter something else, so they believe that they're doing good. So you've got that element, but then you've
Evil's
also
trying to
got the,
stop all of this kind of open spiritual
yeah,
awake.
but why are they looking to stop it? Because it's a threat,
Yes.
because it challenges everything that you know. And if it challenges everything you know, you can't control people, you can't put them into fear, and then you can't give them instructions that they're going to follow blindly.
Mhm.
Now, what if you can critically think? What if you can problem solve? What if you're exempt from all of this control?
Yeah.
Nobody can touch you. So you're not going to be monetized. You're not going to follow like all of the legislation, regulation, all of these restrictive compounds. You're just going to go, I'm just not bothered. And therefore, what then have they got? Nothing. Because they've built this system on the control and the fear and the monetization. Whereas it's going to become abundantly clear that your authenticity becomes currency at some point. And
Right.
therefore your frequency will then feed into that. And then what you'll do is you'll work out a way of actually potentially going back to some of these old school methods like bartering. I can offer you this service. Can you offer me that service? Now you haven't got money involved,
Mhm.
but does money even exist? Yes,
No.
it's an exchange of energy, but there's a load of constructs around it that give you limiting beliefs, limiting structures, how you have to rely on it, how you're dependent upon it, how it forms this, that, and the other. So you have to go through all of those. And then that's extra layers. But yeah, all we're doing is going, well, hold on, what aligns with me? And then the ultimate goal, GOAL, is game of aligned living. That's the goal, right? So all you do is you work on yourself and you work harder on yourself than you work on anybody else or anything else.
Mhm.
And then you watch as that ripple effect then changes pretty much everything around you.
Mhm. Yes, one thing changes and then it's all
Hmm.
concertinas.
Yeah.
Wow.
But as you can see, I did tell you earlier, there's lots to pretty much anything and everything. And then you have to remember that most people have three or four ways of doing certain things anyway. So
Right.
if you ever wanted to cure something, there's a lot of stuff that you've got to go through. And like we're not even scratching the surface with some of the stuff that we offer these days.
Yeah. So what are you offering at the moment with your, do you know what you're offering currently?
I'm kind of
Hit
see
me hard.
I have the luxury of too much kind of instant thought. So I can map things out and I can go through processes and flip things quite quickly. So like the free discovery call to me, for instance, is pointless because it's just irresponsible from a therapeutic perspective. Why are
Hmm.
you going to come and sit with me for 30 minutes for me to try and find some information out about you, for me then to go away to not technically be able to help you? So what I do is I offer for, I think it's about £187, I offer a forensic analysis.
Hmm.
So what you do is you work with me from the moment that you start talking to me,
Hmm.
right? So if you do nothing else, you've got a block of an hour
Hmm.
whereby, having said that, it could be an hour, it could be 2 hours, depends what you want to do. But you're in that hour, you're going to go away knowing that either I can help you or you've already been helped. So you come for a certain problem, and I can literally have you go and leave you with, well, I help you with this. Here's the steps. But the beauty about it is I can give you the steps, but you've got no way of actioning them. Not how traditionally it's done, where it's like, I need to keep my secrets and therefore hold it back, and then you've got to pay me money. No, no, here's everything up front.
Hmm.
Then what you can do is you can then go into sort of a sort of over a couple of weeks, you can then go into more of a advanced kind of structure whereby we have like three lots of like an hour and a half session. And what we do is we deal with either micro problems and we get rid of them in each of those sessions, or we can do like one big thing spread over a bit of time. And then the other thing is you can then go into a 3 month container whereby you can basically take any aspect of your life, bring it to the table, and we literally just streamline every single aspect and element of it.
For something
But
like confidence,
yeah,
for example.
yeah. So you can work on confidence, but where does it come from? So you've got options. You can come for an hour and then you can basically go through that. And then you've got the next phase up, which is, well, we can break it down into little segments and deal with each of those segments. Or you can come work on your confidence, but I don't look at confidence in the standard way.
So
So
looking
I
at your
base,
timeline and finding out in your childhood,
yeah,
closing your eyes, looking, trying to find a memory, but then commanding like hypnotherapy type
yeah.
speech to
So
speak to the subconscious.
so if you have a look at confidence, I like to break words into more beneficial terms. So if you have a look at confidence, it's conf, ID, and ence, right?
Your eye.
So the conf is confirmed or confirmation.
Mhm.
The ID is identity,
Mhm.
and the ence is essence,
Right.
right? So it's confirming your identity in spirit form. So it's where you align so perfectly with an outcome or an experience or a skill set that you faultlessly show up in that frequency unconditionally, consistently over time.
Reversing back to that, and then
Yeah.
people, yeah.
So if you want confidence in something, it's not about you feeling good enough. It's about you going, this person that does this would show up in this way. They would think, act, and feel like this. And what you do is you just adopt those processes straight away. And then what you do is you become so ingrained in those new ways and processes that you naturally, the byproduct is the confirmed identity in spirit form. And therefore, that's confidence.
And then you act how you want to
And
feel.
then you show up. And that's all you have to do. Just be in spirit form, show up.
It's contemplating basically what you want, being forward thinking,
Yeah.
isn't, and then reimagining it. So you're
Yeah.
not accessing old thoughts and memories and patterns.
Mhm.
You're making a new one.
Yeah. So you're confirming your new identity
Yeah.
as wholeness and oneness. And
Mhm.
therefore, you don't have this, oh, I feel confident today, but I don't tomorrow.
Mhm.
No, you've got everything that holds you spiritually in true form, and you just express that outwardly to then get to the position whereby it becomes so ingrained that you can't go, oh, I'm confident today, I'm not confident. There's just a way of being, and that in itself is the confidence. So I like to
Feels
break
like home and
words
feels
into different,
comfortable.
but most of this stuff I've created as concepts and theories, but I've got
Yes. So
hundreds
they're
of
all
them.
your concepts and theories. So you've kind of named them. So
Yep.
you've written some books.
No, it's probably something further down the line, but at the
Right.
minute I struggle nailing my who am I actually targeting
You need
when
to
I can
actually write this down.
help everybody. So yeah, at some point I'll start documenting sort of sessions and then I'll create a proper structure that means you can have it, but without me necessarily teaching it. So you can get all of these concepts in one place, but there's so many of them that it's kind of like, well, does anybody really want just a book of concepts? So
Well, I
there's
mean, it's
there's
a
bigger
whole
fish
new,
to
seems
fry.
like a new subject, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's
But
like we
but if I
had
was
new media,
teaching,
didn't we, when the internet was new?
yeah.
It's like spiritual revolution is like it's a new spiritual revolution, isn't it? It's like
Mm.
people don't know this stuff. People
But
haven't
a lot of
accessed
people,
that. People aren't in touch with that part.
mm,
So Is this just hours and hours of contemplation of you just thinking about stuff, or is just this is just intuitive? You just know.
So a lot of it becomes intuitive and you start channeling stuff once you've done a lot of your healing work. But from my current perspective and where I am, I'm one of these thought leaders that if you look at most of the um, kind of stuff that's going on in the background, it's all to do with the new Earth, the 5D, the splitting, and basically my thought processes and my skill sets are designed to be at the forefront of that movement. So all these concepts, ways of looking at things, they're designed to take you totally out of the 3D construct and into the whole spiritual, just being five-dimensional, everything works, manifestation, alignment, that whole new earth kind of feel to it. So a lot of my stuff is tailored towards that, which I think is why a lot of the stuff I have to take higher level concepts and I have to ground them by making them practical. So if you have a look, whenever I talk to you about a concept, I'll give you a practical, like real life example. So you can go, oh yeah, that kind of matches with that. But a lot of my stuff is designed to basically transform somebody from I'm traumatized, I've got nowhere to go, my life is literally nothing, all the way through to thriving rather than just surviving. And that spectrum itself is what's going to be needed moving forward. Because as people break off or split or they start creating different realities, we're at some point going to have some frequency split. So you're not going to then be attracting all of these negatives. But in order to get there, you've got to get rid of the negatives, but you've also got to recreate all of the positives before that even happened. And I think that's why we're in that transitionary period now, because we're starting to break away, but there's not enough conscious being. So if you have a look, I think they say it's like 144,000 is the magic number, right? So if 144,000 people all get into a certain vibration or a frequency, then it's going to tip the balance. Then what happens is you'll have a split, and then you'll have basically the creation of what sort of the world should be like rather than what was monetized. And then that's when we'll have all of this kind of the spiritual stuff will just be normal. But
You win
these
against
are
evil.
exactly. But you've got to then remember this involves sort of leaving people behind and going and creating stuff that doesn't yet exist. So it's not as simple as a quick switch over, but this is why a lot of people are now waking up. And you've obviously got the people that play on it, but you've got genuine people who are going through all of the healing processes and going through all the refinement because they're meant to be creating this new existence in effect. So
Right.
that's my understanding of it as of right here, right now. But anything can change.
So is it just you? Is there like anyone else who's as awake and open?
I have the
Some
luxury of having taught myself and been very much isolated for the last 9 years. So with that, I've done my own healing work. I've had a look at everything around me and how everything structures and works. I've then had my own personal experiences. I've then front loaded my karma. So I've cleared all of that to then get the back end, which is all the good stuff, which is now more so what I'm stepping into. So the idea now is that I've taken all my lessons from before and I now use them in the back end so that I can be paid to exist.
in the
And
previous
therefore
life,
I'm hmm?
before, as in like the previous life.
No, as in like my early stages of this life.
Oh, right, okay.
So my early stages of this life have been structured so that I clear my karma from past lives. So technically it's the same thing, but we have to isolate it into the component, which is this life. I've cleared all of my imbalances,
Yeah.
shall we say, from
So
past lives.
going back your past life, do you know anything about it?
I've not see I because I'm teaching stuff, I don't have to go too far into it and I can have reference points. But in the 1400s, I used to be a midwife, which basically explains a lot of my sort of medical side that's just known. and sort of reading of sort of diagnostics and machines and working out sort of kind of the medical side itself. And obviously, having had sort of a couple of children in this lifetime, then I have experiences around that whereby I've had to use energy healing. I've had to use sort of more advanced concepts in order to untether a soul and bring it back in, and therefore obviously save lives by reading machinery and energies that are potentially not available to the naked eye. So I've had experiences around that while I was developing my skill sets in order to harness energy and how to manipulate energy, but not from a place of control, from a place of molding. So then what happens is you get involved in the mental side because it goes nicely with the energetics. And then because you look at the energetics and where they're off, you can then work out where there's blockages in the body, where the meridians, where the chi isn't moving, where the mental constructs are then compounding, where the chakras are then blocked. And then all of
Chakras
these
are
things,
connected together, aren't they? So
yeah,
if
yeah.
one's blocked, does it affect
So
other
it can do, but you also have to remember that there's structures built in structures. So your body, your left and your right side will offset.
right?
So you'll then have different organs will also offset. Different experiences will create dis-ease. So not disease, but
Oh,
dis-ease, as in
yeah.
not a place of calm. And therefore you can have those things that affect the circadian rhythm and you can affect obviously the body structure. Then all of these things become messages. But then this leads me quite nicely onto obviously the podcast and being beyond the blue,
Yeah.
because when you mentioned it earlier, the first thing that came to mind is the blue is the communication. So like the throat chakra,
Oh, yeah.
right? So if you have a look, and you'll have to see if this resonates at all for you. If you go beyond the blue, you can go both
With
ways.
waters above the air.
Yeah, right. So
Oh,
you can go both ways from that point. So the podcast is a form of communication, so
yeah.
i.e. the throat, and then obviously the blue chakra. But then you've got beyond it, as in up, so the spiritual aspect and the
Yeah.
higher dimensions. But you've also got beyond it, as in below, which is more the heart and where the soul is. And then obviously you've then got your power center, which is your solar plexus. You've then got your creativity, which is your sacral. You've then got obviously your root chakra, which is then all of your survival. So if you have a look at it from that, you can go both ways beyond the blue.
Yeah.
So you can do all of the spiritual higher level stuff, but you can do more of the heart-led sort of leadership, power, empowerment, women's empowerment, creativity. You've then got all of these other aspects that you can then bring into the overall concept of the podcast because of where you're positioned quite nicely in terms of the throat.
Yeah.
And that was literally when you said it earlier, I was like, I'll tell you that later. But that's literally where I went with it. It's like you've got a huge scope there, and then you can literally do whatever you want to mold within kind of that structure. So whether or not you use it,
That's
it's
a
there for you
brilliant
to
first
use.
podcast,
Yeah.
isn't it? Very
Yep.
appropriate.
So I figured I'll either ask you what it means for you, or I just tell you mine, and then you can fill it in at a later date.
Well,
But as
yeah,
soon as you said it, I'm
I
like,
don't know, it just came to me. I was trying to think of a password for something and it just came into my head. Beyond the
yeah,
blue. I was thinking beyond the blue as in like
yeah, as in
what's
otherworldly.
happening, or it could mean a few things, but 26 follows me
Yeah,
around. You were saying two
yeah,
and six is eight. So it's
yeah.
like infinity type
So you
thing.
got infinity. Yeah. So yeah, that's where I went with it. I'm like, it's quite nice because you can basically fit whatever it is that you're doing into that structure. So if it's spiritual, great, it fits going one way. And if it's more sort of down to earth and practical, then it goes the other way. So yeah, I quite liked it. I'm like, yeah, makes sense. So
Yeah,
why
so
not?
getting in touch with your spiritual side. I mean, is
Yep.
that something that you've always felt like you were spiritual? So I've always felt like I'm quite spiritual. I've always like believed in life after death and
Hmm.
just always known that that's how I feel.
Yeah.
Always
I've kind of had the knowing that I'm different, but not knowing why was how
knowing
it
that
started
it's
for me.
substance, yeah, that it's more
Yeah.
than
So it's like none of this stuff here makes sense. But like it's not structured correctly. So if you go back to like Atlantis and the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria and Syria and all these other things that you can kind of bring in, all of these civilizations failed for a certain reason. And it kind of reminds me of all of these failings and how you're then going back to kind of bring everything to what should be rather than what destroyed humanity, basically. So that's kind of how it started for me. And then I got to the point where it's like, well, I'm an eternal spiritual being living a temporary human existence as this character or this form. And then that's basically what I've run with since. So it's understandable from a sort of grounds level, but also if you're more advanced, you can also kind of grasp the same concept.
Do you believe that there was a civilization before, like Tartaria? Tartaria.
Tartaria was
Like the amazing kind of
they
spiritual.
if you look at it in real terms, they built the Great Wall of China. So if you have a look at the structure of the Great Wall of China, it's designed to keep the Chinese out, not protect them. So Tartaria was the other side, and they built that wall.
Right.
But you have all these civilizations, and then you remember that the history was created by the victors, because those that were lost can't tell the story.
Yeah.
So basically, you could argue that the entire history of the planet is falsified.
Yeah.
Now, what we're doing is we're uncovering all of these truths and we're uncovering everything moving forward to get back to a position whereby we know what things are and therefore it's no longer lost. Like the hieroglyphs in Egypt, or the scrolls and everything from whatever the testaments are and whatever the books are. It's like all of these things will at some point be brought back into play.
They
And all
were
we're doing is we're
energy
just
pools,
aligning. Yeah,
and we had free energy
yeah,
and very huge buildings
yep.
that had energy points on them, like cathedrals, the round energy globes were
Yeah.
like,
Well, I think they've done something similar with the three pyramids in Giza. If you
right,
go down, they basically have like pillars now. I think they did some geocentric, whatever it was, and they found that literally they tunnel right the way down. So they're basically giant transponders or something like that.
right,
But it's too coincidental, and nature obviously runs in symmetry
yeah.
and spirals and ratios. So is it a coincidence that they're all aligned in a certain position? I don't think so. So there's things that people want us to know and things that people don't want us to know. And I think if we found out more about all of the stuff that they don't want us to know, then that once again is the control mechanism gone. So interesting, to say the least.
Yeah. So what about the spiritual kind of side of things? Can you actually kind of
Mm.
see your ancestors or speak to your ancestors or aware
I
of?
have a yeah, I have a theory on this.
Yes.
If you think about it logically, you have never seen or you would have never had any experience of anybody three generations up,
Yeah.
right? So beyond that, you're very unlikely to have met the person. So therefore, you could have been that person. Because
Right.
you've got to think, if you're still currently experiencing all the problems and the issues and the lineage and the bloodlines and all the ancestral karma, if you're here now to clear it, then it would make sense for you to have not previously dealt with it, but for you to have possibly created it.
Right.
So you could potentially have been like your great great grandmother,
That really is karma. I'm being on the receiving end of
which is a bit weird.
those bits.
But it's how I look at it
Body.
because if you think cycles, it would make sense for you to then incarnate back into the same people to then try and correct the thing that you all can't correct
Mhm.
until obviously such a point where it's corrected and you can then leave that lineage and go into a different bloodline and then start basically clearing all of that karma. So whether that's a choice for the soul at soul level or not, it depends. But usually I would expect that to be the way. Well, that's my current understanding of it.
Yes,
Otherwise, it
it's
doesn't make logical sense for you to go, oh, well, let me pick this random family this time, that random family that time. But then if you haven't got the karma in that lineage or that line, then it doesn't make sense for you to be there to clear it because you can't balance anything. So therefore, all you're doing is creating an imbalance because you're now somewhere that you can't balance. So you're not taking it the right way. You're taking it from a place of balance, and therefore you're creating a cause and effect that could potentially put you out of balance. Then it forces you back in because you now have to correct the imbalance because it was previously balanced. So it gets a bit confusing, but
Yes, because you'd only look to see your recent ancestors as well, wouldn't you? You don't
yeah,
really see the ones previously, or
yeah.
you
But
want
if
to
you haven't met the
maybe
person,
call them.
technically you could have been the person.
Yes,
That's how I look
you
at it.
wouldn't want to see you. So the spirit's gone, it's within you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
But
it's
you
holding.
treat it as separate, but you then have to look back at the whole. Is you just experiencing it through a different avatar or a different character or a different perspective? Because at that point in time, you were playing a different person and a different role in the bigger picture.
So you're missing. Because really, you're missing the physical person rather than the spirit
Yeah,
of the person,
yeah.
aren't you?
But then you've got to think if part of
That's
you is in them and you've got to reclaim that fragment, then it would suggest that you potentially were them and therefore part of you is in them because you were them.
yeah,
To tie it back to our obviously earlier thing of reclaiming fractured elements of self. But if
yeah.
you see, if you know enough about things, it folds back in. And then you're going, well, hold on, this thing and that thing are so opposite, they shouldn't work. But yet, hold on, that thing there means that both of those work as if it's faultless. But yeah, I spent years on and off being like, how does all this stuff work? And then potentially you can get yourself to the point where you're ahead of the game. And then the beauty about that is you have to wait for everything in your reality to catch up because you can do things a lot quicker than reality can change because of the density. So the easy way to describe it is if you drop a stone into a pond, you get the ripple effect. But then now imagine there's a wooden stake further up. And as the ripple gets to the wooden stake, you get that little ripple effect that comes out the front before the rest of the wave catches up. So technically, you're now at that front bit of the wave before the rest of the wave catches up. And then at that point, you
Did you
then
have any
start.
mushrooms or anything or ayahuasca to
No,
reveal
I've
all
never
this?
touched any of it,
Really?
sadly.
Wow, you should. I never had
But
ayahuasca,
yeah.
but yeah, mushrooms.
No, it's like all of these things are just different modalities or methodologies for people to access things.
Mm.
Whereas, genuinely speaking, if you know that everything you need is within you, you don't need any of the external. And all you're doing is you're just connecting with yourself, knowing that that's enough and that has access to everything. Then you can start channeling all the weird, wacky, wonderful pools of wisdom
Mhm.
and bringing stuff in because you're then open to being the vessel that that can manifest through.
Mhm.
And then you'll get things like thoughts or random things in the shower because obviously you're open and sort of in receiving mode. And then
Right,
the universe likes to funnel things through where there's no resistance and where there's a flow. And
right.
as long as it can keep flowing and as long as you become that vessel, it will continue to do so. And then all you're doing is you're just maintaining that. The only time we ever have a problem is if we stop the flow,
Which is the blockage thing.
which is a blockage thing. Because there's a trauma, there's a problem that got stuck, there's part of the process that wasn't completed or finished properly. There's something that we don't understand to be correct. And all we're doing is we're just removing those blockages so that life can flow through us. And therefore we can then become the expression of that flow.
Wow, that energy.
Yeah.
Can you see the colors of the energy?
I
You're a Reiki
ye-
master.
I used to, but then I outgrew it because
Right.
it didn't really have a purpose.
Hmm.
So if I want to sense energy, I can just sense energy. I don't need to sense it based on color form or frequency form. I can just tap into it. So you learn it obviously through whatever the initial means is, but then you develop your own skill beyond that initial means.
Hmm.
So it's the vehicle for you to remember, basically. And then once you've remembered, you then make it your own, and therefore you don't ever use it in the way that you learnt it in order to remember it.
Right.
And then that shows that your own personal growth and development and your own movement has then moved beyond. So I learned hypnotherapy a certain way, then realized all of the limitations to it, and then realized that I didn't need to have the hypnotherapy and I could just talk to somebody and I could still do the same stuff and get the same answers by asking things a certain way.
Yes, it's all connected. All of these
Yeah,
holistic modality
yeah.
types. That, I mean, it's
But there are people that go, well, hold on, I need the modality because that's the stage I'm at. There'll be people that go, well, hold on, can you help me with this problem? You can go, well, hold on, I can offer you hypnotherapy. And they'll go, well, is there a way to do it without?
people are scared of it.
Well,
Yeah. They think they're going
is
to get
it,
knocked
it's,
out, but
yeah,
they're not necessarily.
yeah.
But I'm
But
a user
once,
of hypnotherapy as well. It's not.
mm, yeah. But once you get beyond that, I have to remember it through learning,
Yes.
then you have your own way of delivering that thing that you're interested in, that thing
Can
that
be
you
more
like
creative.
exploring. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what you're doing is you're bringing more of that to the world, but you needed to remember through whatever the modality was that you learnt it in order for you to then go, oh, I can do this way. I can now innovate it. I can make it more efficient. I can make it more aligned with me. I can use it for my own personal gain and benefit.
Yeah.
And then what you find is you learn it a certain way and then you never deliver it the same way that you've learnt it because it only worked that way for the person that founded it, but they were only capable of taking it to that point and you're capable of developing it further.
Mhm.
But you need a way of remembering, and that's the trigger point. That's the here's something, here's a box to open as you're walking through this game of life. Here's the remembrance, here's the deja vu moment. Here's the
Things
let's now
like
open up.
breaking state. So, talking to somebody and then getting them to imagine and then breaking their state and moving their mind away to ask them something completely different and then going back
Mhm.
and then it's had an effect because they've come back. They've
Yeah.
come out and gone. Stuff like that. You probably have to do it at the right time, do you? Like breaking
You
state.
you can kind of do it even easier.
Hmm.
So if you talk to somebody and you start waving fingers around, so you'll see that I do it for like a structural perspective.
Yeah.
If you're focusing on my fingers,
Yeah.
your conscious active part of the brain is taking in the positioning of this,
Yeah.
but the subconscious part of the brain is now wide open for attack because
Right.
you're no longer guarding it because I've redirected your attention to here.
I'm always using my hands like that, so I probably
Yeah. So part of it is energy
consciously.
manipulation,
Oh yeah.
but if you have a look at some of the sci-fi films, you know where they slide things across and move things around on the screens,
Yeah.
but they obviously don't have like a touchpad. It's just like a 3D hologram. It's
Ah,
that type of thing.
programming.
So
So
if you're
have you
waving your
read
hands around,
esoteric
you're
esoteric
yeah.
Hollywood, all about how they well, the satanic ritual of showing you what they're doing so that they can go ahead and do it with all of these
Well, they
movies.
have to as part of the agreement. So they have to show you what they're doing, but
Yeah,
if you don't stop it, you're consenting to it.
exactly.
So
It's
you
you're right down the
consent
rabbit hole.
through non-action,
Mm.
basically. And it's the same with everything.
It's the
So
same.
it's a case of this is what we're doing, this is what we're going to be doing. Anybody got any objections? Well, it just becomes part of the collective conscious. But because people aren't challenging it and people are watching the news, it becomes the forefront of a lot of people's minds. Now, if you have lots of people that see all of this stuff that's being fed in, they're going to create that reality because it's what they know. Now, if you have enough people that aren't doing it, you can create a separate reality that can never create the reality that they're trying to create. But we're not there yet, which is where that comes back to the earlier thing of the split.
So the 500,000 people protesting against Gaza on Saturday,
Mhm.
would that do anything?
That's it's you've got the physical element, but the problem with the physical element and the protest is it doesn't direct you away from the problem, it focuses you more on the problem.
Yes.
So what we're doing is we're creating more of the problem, we're not creating less of that problem. Whereas obviously if you don't watch the news, then you're not going to be creating or consciously acting upon that news event and therefore creating that in the kind of
Which is why they
do
never
some kind
showed
of
the marches on the news for
yeah,
Gaza,
yeah,
actually, on BBC.
exactly.
Uh,
They'll feed you the narrative that you can consciously create because you're being fed it.
mhm.
Whereas the people that aren't watching the news are creating some other reality because they don't even know about it. But if there's too many people that are stuck in that reality where it exists, you can't then break away from it. And that's where the tipping point from earlier comes in because you have to have enough people not consciously participating to create some other outcome. So if you think of it from a timeline perspective and jumping timelines, there must be a timeline where there's enough people so that we don't have world wars. We don't have all this conflict. We don't have this fighting, but we don't yet have all of the conscious participants to go and create that split. And this is where then like the 5D, the 4D, the new world, and everything else then comes into the kind of that picture again.
So Jesus will return. And he
Well,
might have
see,
returned.
this is the thing, right? You can take this concept,
Yeah,
right? So the returning of Jesus is basically Christ consciousness,
right.
right? So Christ consciousness, if you have a look, there's 33 days that he was obviously taken to the kind
Oh,
of
God,
cross,
3-3.
right? But there's 33 vertebra in your spine,
Right. So it can't be a
right?
bad thing then, 33.
So if you think about it, if you align every single element of your chakras, your meridians, your spine, you get rid of all the cellular memory, all of your traumas, then what it does is people refer to it as like a Kundalini awakening. It's where your spine stacks itself to the point whereby the fluid in the spine can go from top to bottom and bottom to top. And what they're saying is when the Christ consciousness comes in, it's where the spinal fluid manages to get to the pituitary gland. And then what you can do is you can channel all of that like sexual energy and stuff and push it to the brain. And then you can store it there. And then you can use that potential energy to magnify everything beyond that. And that's what they're referring to from the conscious creation side. And it's connecting that disconnect. So it's not the physical person, it's literally a metaphor for people coming into consciousness and then creating
Right.
correctly.
Okay.
So you can take
So
the,
Jesus is within us.
yeah. So rather than having religions and then having the splits and everything else, it's like God. Well, people refer to God. Well, it's like it's guidance of divinity,
Yes.
God, right? So it
Not.
doesn't matter if you refer to it as God, Allah, or some other sort of Buddha. So those type of mainstream figures.
Mhm.
If you're looking at guidance of divinity, it's whatever that looks like for you. If you've done enough work, it's you yourself. If you've done a bit of work, then you might be in between stages. If you still need that idol or that outside force, then it shows up through Jesus. It shows up through all the religious side. Some people can treat the guidance of divinity as in their science or their modality or their skills that they've learned. But it then opens it up so it's unified for everybody to still use God, but not have it isolated for like some religious term,
I
and
think it's
therefore have the
within all that.
separation.
I
Yeah.
think within all
But
that.
but God is just the creator. The creator force is you.
Yeah.
How do you create? You create your reality through how you think, act, and feel.
Hmm.
Now, all you do is you control that. So you get rid of what's blocking you from moving forward. But then the flip side is you get rid of also what's maintaining you where you are. Now you burn the candle at both ends and then watch as you get this trajectory that takes you through the roof very quickly. Not therapy for the next 20 years and no outcome. Literally weeks, months, days. And that's basically the work that I do. I shrink that time down so it's literally nothing.
So what does that look like and feel like?
What does it look and feel like?
look like and feel like?
Well, it depends on the individual because
Mhm.
you've got to remember that somebody who's had this for 20 years is going to act differently to somebody that's kind of just been subject to it. So the beauty of the work is it's very much the individual's experience and giving them more of that experience. So how they process it is kind of just the end result of all of the internal work that then gets done.
So it's just like a release,
Yeah.
lightening up.
But it's free to be whatever it's meant to be.
Yeah. As
I
a
think that's the distinguishing factor. It looks like whatever it's meant to look like.
yeah.
And that's solely down to the individual to make it sort of unique or special to their own experience.
Mhm. Wow.
I know, good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's good.
I told you I can talk about anything.
Yeah. How long's that been? An hour and 20. Do you know how long you
Yeah.
want to go on? We could do another one.
Well, I was thinking about it earlier, and while you're setting it up, if you haven't got guests ready made and you want to do a
Yeah.
regular thing, then
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to come and sit with you and just have a chat. I would say over tea and biscuits, but I don't like tea and I don't eat biscuits. So,
Coffee.
so
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll be up for
yeah.
that.
But if you wanted to make it a regular thing, but this
Yeah,
comes back to the earlier
that'd
thing,
be
is
great.
the person that runs the podcast regularly ends up running a podcast. So all you're doing is just doing that at the front end and loading it
Collaborating.
now.
Yeah.
And then obviously it will then naturally become part of your day to day. So
Yeah,
if you wanted consistency from a guest perspective until potentially
absolutely.
you branch out for other people and other
Yeah.
experiences,
Yeah.
then I'm quite happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Love that.
Yep.
Same
Well,
time, same place next week then.
yep, I can do Mondays.
Monday. Cool.
Yeah. Tuesdays and Thursdays are a bit odd at the minute
Yes.
because I've got a gentleman that's going through an identity crisis and
Right.
nearly killed himself a couple of weeks ago, but
Goodness.
that's the beauty of the work that I do. I can fit into basically any and every situation.
So yeah, you've got lots of clients, are quite busy.
No, I'm I'm sparingly doing things because a lot of it is tailored around obviously my karma stuff still unraveling. So
Mhm.
there's things that like I'm helping people with or exposing them to or teaching them sort of ins and outs. But this is all to do with sort of me balancing my own stuff and obviously getting to the position whereby I can then remember the stuff that kind of is coming in. So I'm still phasing that in and out, but obviously the primary goal at the minute is obviously making